The marble was cold under her knees before the sun was, and Adais pressed the wet cloth into it as if the floor were the only thing in that great house that ever asked her honestly for anything. She was 24 years old, on her knees in the empty entrance hall of the Okonkwo estate, scrubbing a staircase wide enough for 6 women to descend abreast. And she had been told, once, plainly the way you tell a dog, that the day the lowest tread of that staircase was not spotless would be the day she found her bag on the gate step and the gate locked behind it. So she scrubbed. The bucket beside her smelled of cheap soap and river water. Her hands were cracked at the knuckles. Somewhere far above her, in a bedroom the size of the house she had been born in, the eldest daughter of that family was still asleep on linen Adais had ironed at 2 in the morning, and would wake in a few hours and find a reason to be cruel. Because cruelty was the one thing in that house that came to Chinyere Okonkwo without effort. What no one in that house knew, what Adais herself did not know, kneeling there with a tear she would not let fall sliding down to the corner of her mouth, was that on the far side of the city, a man who could have bought the Okonkwo estate and forgotten he owned it was at that same dawn hour standing at a window in a plain charcoal shirt, looking at a city of 3 million lit windows, searching for one face he had seen only once and had not been able to put down since. His name does not matter yet. What mattered was that 9 months earlier, on a rainy night, Adesi had already half forgotten, because kindness, when it is your habit, leaves no memory of itself. She had done a small thing for an old woman in the rain, and that small thing had set in motion the one machine in this world that grinds slow and grinds exceedingly fine. The proud did not know it was already moving. The humble did not know she was already free. That is the way of it. The wicked sleep soundly the very night God begins to expose them. Adais finished the bottom step. She sat back on her heels, breathed, and for one moment let herself look up the whole length of that staircase to the high gold-railed landing, where the morning light came down in a single clean column and lay on the marble like something poured. She thought, the way she let herself think only when she was alone. One day someone will come down those stairs who does not own me. She did not know how soon. She picked up her bucket. She went to begin the long haul. Consider the house. The Okonkwo family had money the way some families have a loud relative. It filled every room and had stopped being interesting to the people who lived with it. The father, Chief Okonkwo, was a hard old man with a chieftaincy title he had bought and a temper he had not. The mother had died years before, and into the cool space where a mother should have stood the eldest daughter, Chinyere, had grown. Beautiful in the sharp way of a knife that has never once been used to cut bread, only to threaten. She was 28, and she had learned early that a poor girl in your house is the cheapest entertainment money can buy. And there was the grandmother, Mama Nkechi, 60, who ruled the back of the house from a high-backed chair with a carved cane she used more on the help than on the floor. Between the two of them, Adesi's days were measured out in small humiliations the way other people's are measured out in cups of coffee. Adesi had come to that house at 19, an orphan with a single change of clothes, hired to clean, and over 5 years she had become the thing every cruel household needs and despises at once. The one who does everything and is owed nothing. She did it without bitterness, not because she was a saint, but because her mother, dying in a one-room flat with the rain coming through the roof, had held her daughter's face in 2 thin hands and said, "Ada, the world will tell you that the kind are foolish. Be foolish. God keeps a different set of books." Adais believed her mother. That belief was the only inheritance she had, and it was about to pay out at a rate that would silence an entire ballroom. And if you have ever watched someone good be treated like furniture, watch the world look straight through a kind person as though their kindness made them invisible. And some quiet part of you ached to see that person finally, publicly, undeniably proven worth more than every proud face in the room. Then you already understand why this channel exists, and you already belong here. We tell one kind of story at Hidden Crown Stories, and it is this one. The humble lifted, the proud brought low, the crown that was hidden all along set at last on the right head. If that is the story your heart has been waiting to hear, take 1 second now and subscribe. Because the people who do are the people this whole channel was built for. And what happens to Adai's in the next hour is exactly the kind of thing we stay for. It began, as these things do, with a card. The card came on heavy cream paper with gold lettering, and it was an invitation to the Harvest of Hope, the single largest charity gala in the city, the one event of the year where old money and new money put on their best faces and pretended to like one another for an evening, all of it raising funds for the Children's Hospital out on the Eastern Road. Every important family in the region would be there. The Okonkwo's had 2 seats, and the gala that year had a new patron, a benefactor nobody had quite met. A man whose wealth had appeared in the city the way weather appears, suddenly and everywhere. A man who had quietly bought the failing hospital and saved it and asked for nothing in return. Not even his name on the wall. People called him many things. Nobody had a photograph. He did not give them. Chinyere read the card at breakfast, holding it up to the morning light, and a slow idea moved behind her eyes the way a crocodile moves behind still water. You saw only the ripple. She looked across the long table, out through the open door, to where Adai's was on her knees again, polishing the brass at the base of the staircase. "Grandmother," Chinyere said sweetly, "I think we should bring the cleaning girl to the gala." Mama Nkechi looked up from her pap, her cane resting against her chair. "Bring her?" "As our guest." Chinyere smiled, and it was a beautiful, terrible thing, that smile. Think of it, all those people, the Adigwis, the Belogans, and we walk in with our maid in her rags, and we tell everyone she is a dear family friend. She set the card down, and then we watch. For a moment the old woman said nothing. Then a sound came out of her that took Adai's 2 rooms away, a moment to recognize as laughter. "You wicked girl," Mama Nkechi said, delighted. "You truly wicked girl, yes. Let the whole city see what a servant looks like next to her betters. Let her stand among them and know what she is." She thumped the cane once on the floor, the way she did when a thing pleased her. Bring her. And so it was decided, between 2 people who had never once in their lives been told no, that Adis would be carried into the grandest room in the city, not as a person, but as a punchline. And the thing they did not know, the thing that makes me want to lean close and tell you to watch carefully now, was that they were about to walk their own pride straight into the one room in the entire region where it could not survive the night. They told her that evening. Chinyere came down to the kitchen herself, which she never did, and stood in the doorway with her arms folded while Adai's dried the last pot. "You're coming to the gala on Saturday," Chinyere said. Adaize turned, the cloth still in her hands. "Madam, the Harvest of Hope. You're coming. With us." Chinyere's eyes moved over her, slow, amused, cataloging every worn thread of the gray-blue uniform. "As you are. You'll wear exactly what you're wearing now. Don't get any ideas about borrowing one of my gowns. I'd know, and I'd take it off you in front of everyone." She let that sit. "You will stand where I tell you. You will not speak unless spoken to. And you will smile when people ask who you are." Do you understand? Adais understood. She understood completely. She understood that she was being invited the way a bull is invited to a market, to be looked at, priced, and laughed over. She felt the heat come up the back of her neck, and behind it, older and quieter, she heard her mother's voice. Be foolish. God keeps a different set of books. Yes, madam, Adais said. I understand. Good. Chinyere turned to go, then paused, unable to resist. And Adais, do try to enjoy yourself. It isn't every day a girl like you gets to see how the other half lives. She laughed, going up the stairs, and the laugh floated back down a long time after she was gone. That night, Adais sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the servants' room behind the kitchen, and she took out the only beautiful thing she owned in all the world. It was a single bangle, thin, worn gold, her mother's. The one thing she had not sold in the hungry years because selling it would have been like selling the sound of her mother's voice. She turned it in the lamplight. She thought about Saturday. She thought about standing in a room full of people who would look at her dress and decide they knew everything about her soul. And then she did the thing her mother had taught her, the thing that had kept her standing through 5 years of that house. She decided quietly that they could take the evening, but they could not take her dignity. Because dignity is not a thing you are given by a room. It is a thing you carry into it. She did not sleep much, but she did not weep either. She breathed, and she held the bangle to her chest. And somewhere across the city, the man in the charcoal shirt was looking at a guest list for a gala he himself was secretly hosting, running his finger down a column of important family names. Adigwe, Balogun, Okonkwo, and pausing, for no reason he could have named, on the last one. Now I have to take you back 9 months, because a reversal means nothing if you do not know what is being reversed. And the thing that was about to happen at that gala had its root in a single rainy night that Adais had almost forgotten. It had been a market day. The rainy season, the gutters running. Mama Nkechi had sent Adais out on foot, in the downpour, to fetch a particular bitter leaf from a particular woman 3 miles off, because the old woman had decided at 4 in the afternoon that she wanted a particular soup and that a servant getting soaked was a small price for it. So Adais went, and on the way back, soaked to the bone, the bitter leaf clutched to her chest, she came around the corner of the old market and found an elderly woman sitting on the wet ground against a shuttered stall, alone in the rain. Her wrapper soaked through, her face gray with cold and something worse than cold. People were walking past her. That is the part Adais remembered later. Not the woman, but the people, the dozens of them, hurrying by under umbrellas, stepping around the old woman the way you step around a puddle. Nobody stopped. In a city of 3 million, nobody stopped. Adais stopped. She knelt down in the mud. She was always kneeling, that girl. Life had her on her knees more often than her feet. And she put her hand on the old woman's shoulder and said, Mama, look at me. Are you hurt? And the old woman turned eyes on her that were clouded and frightened and proud all at once. The eyes of a person not used to needing help and humiliated to need it now. And she said she could not remember her way home, that the rain had come, and the world had gone strange. And she had sat down because her legs would not carry her, and no one had stopped. So Adais took off her own thin shawl, soaked as it was, and wrapped it around the old woman's shoulders, which did very little, but it was what she had. And then she did the foolish thing, the thing her mother would have done. She got the old woman up onto her own back. The woman was thin, lighter than the basket of yams Adais carried every market day, and she carried her. through the rain, asking at every stall, every doorway, "Do you know this woman? Do you know where she stays?" Until 2 streets on a frightened young driver came running out of a side road shouting a name, the old woman's name, and fell on his knees in the mud himself out of relief, saying he had lost her for an hour, that she had wandered from the car, that her son would have his life for it. And Adase handed the old woman down into that young man's arms, and the old woman caught Adase's wrist with a grip far stronger than her thin hand looked, and held it, and looked at her, and said, "What is your name, child?" And Adase, dripping, already late, already braced for the beating that would be waiting for her at the Okonkwo gate for taking too long, said only, "It doesn't matter, Mama. Get home safe. God keep you." And she pulled her wrist free, gently, and turned, and ran home into the dark, to be slapped by Mama Nkechi for letting the bitter leaf get rained on. She never told anyone. There was no one to tell. She forgot it the way you forget a kindness, completely the next morning, because to the truly kind, kindness is not an event. It is just Tuesday. But the old woman did not forget. The old woman went home to a house with more rooms than the Okonkwo estate, and wept in front of her son, and told him a poor girl in the rain had carried her on her back through the city when 3 million people walked past, and would not even give her name, would not stay long enough to be thanked, asked for nothing, and was gone into the dark before he could be sent for. And her son, a man who had spent his whole life surrounded by people who wanted something from him and had begun to believe such a person as his mother described could not actually exist, listened to that story, and something in him went very still, and then very certain. He had been looking for her ever since. 9 months. He had sent people to every market. He had the one detail his mother could give, a gray-blue dress, the kind a house servant wears, and a thin, worn gold bangle on her wrist, which his mother had seen up close when the girl wrapped the shawl. A servant's uniform and a single gold bangle. In a city of 3 million. He had decided privately that he would know her face when he saw it, because his mother had described it to him so many times, the kindness in it, that he saw it in his sleep. And he had quietly bought a hospital and saved it, and become the unnamed patron of the city's largest gala, and put out invitations to every important family in the region, and arranged to host that gala himself in disguise. Pouring water, clearing plates, a waiter that no proud guest would ever look twice at. For one reason, and one reason only. Because if he watched every face that came through that door, sooner or later the face from his mother's story would come through it too. He did not know her name was Adase. He did not know she was coming as a joke, in her cleaning dress, on the arm of the very people who tormented her. He only knew he would be watching the door. I told you this machine grinds slow. Watch now how fine. Saturday came. The Okonkwo car pulled up to the gala under a sky going purple with dusk. And the great house glowed ahead of them. Every window gold, music coming out the open doors, a red carpet running up marble steps, lined with men in dark suits and women in gowns that cost more than Adase would earn in 10 lifetimes. Chinyere stepped out first in emerald green sequined lace, jet hair gleaming, gold at her throat and wrists. And she turned and looked back into the car at Adase, in her faded gray-blue uniform and her worn brown sandals, and her smile was the happiest Adase had ever seen it. "Come, dear family friend," Chinyere said, loud enough for the carpet to hear. "Don't be shy." Mama Nkechi came next, in deep purple Ankara and a gold head wrap, leaning on her carved cane, already wheezing with anticipated laughter. And then Adase. She came out of the car slowly, and she stood. and for one moment that the whole glittering scene seemed to pause and look at her. The only plain thing in a sea of jewels, a gray-blue smudge on a red carpet, a servant where a guest should be. A ripple went down the line. Someone laughed, not unkindly, just startled. Cinieri drank it in like wine. But Adese did not look down. That was the thing none of them had counted on. She lifted her chin, and she clasped her mother's thin gold bangle against her wrist with 2 fingers the way she did when she needed her mother near. And she walked up that red carpet between the rich and the beautiful with her back straight and her eyes level. And she carried into that room the one thing that cannot be bought at any price and cannot be mocked out of a person who has decided to keep it. She carried her dignity, intact, up the steps and through the gold doors, while the proud woman ahead of her mistook the room's stairs for triumph. Inside, it was a palace, a ballroom under 3 vast chandeliers, a floor of polished marble that threw the light back up, and at the far end of it, the wide sweep of a grand staircase, gold-railed, rising to a landing. And Adese, for one heartbeat, stopped breathing, because it was the staircase from her dreams, the clean column of light, the treads she would have known anywhere, because she had scrubbed their twin every morning for 5 years. She did not know why the sight of it steadied her. She only knew that it did. "Stand there," Cinieri said, pointing to a spot near a pillar at the edge of the floor, the most visible, useless spot in the room. "Don't move. Don't touch anything. And smile. People will want to come and see you." And they did. That was the cruelty of it. The slow public cruelty Cinieri had paid for, with the price of an extra seat. All evening, guests drifted over, drawn by Cinieri's loud, laughing introductions. "Have you met our dear friend? Isn't she charming? She does so much for our household." And the guests would look Adese up and down, understand the joke in a glance, and either laugh or look away, embarrassed for her, which was somehow worse. 3 young women in bright Ankara and gold, friends of Cinieri's, made a game of circling her, pointing behind their hands, comparing her sandals to their heels in stage whispers meant to carry. Mama Nkechi sat in a velvet chair nearby and watched it all with her cane across her knees, grinning, occasionally calling out a fresh humiliation like a woman at a boxing match calling for blood. Once, in the middle of all of it, a small thing happened that nobody important noticed. But I want you to. A young serving girl, one of the Gala's own staff, no older than 16, carrying a tray too heavy for her thin arms, caught her heel on the marble near Adese's pillar and went down. The tray with her, crystal glasses shattering across the floor in a bright, terrible spray. And the whole nearby crowd turned with that particular cold delight people have for someone else's small disaster. The girl froze on her knees in the broken glass, scarlet with shame, certain she was about to be screamed at, sacked, ruined. And Adese in her gray-blue rags, the joke of the evening, the one with the most reason of anyone in that room to be glad it was someone else's turn. Adese went down on her own knees beside the girl in her borrowed humiliation and began, calmly, with her bare cracked hands, to gather the broken glass into a napkin, murmuring low, only for the girl, "Easy. Easy now. Look at me. It's only glass. I've broken more than this and lived. Breathe. We'll have it cleared before anyone remembers." And she helped the trembling girl up and pressed the napkin of glass into a passing steward's hands, and turned the girl gently back toward the kitchens with a word that nobody else heard. And what none of them knew, what Cinieri, laughing 30 feet away, did not know, was that across the room, a man in a charcoal waiter's shirt had stopped pouring water and was watching a girl in rags kneel in broken glass to save a stranger from shame, and that something in his chest had gone very still. The way it goes still in a person who has just seen, with his own eyes. The thing he had crossed a city to find and was beginning to fear did not exist. Daisy did not know she had been seen. She got up and brushed the glass dust from her knees and went back to her pillar, and she stood there and breathed and held her bangle and let the long, bright evening wash over her. Because she had decided in the kitchen on Wednesday night that they could have the evening but not her soul. She watched the dancing. She watched a string quartet she would never have known to imagine. And she watched, without quite knowing she was watching, a quiet man in a plain charcoal waiter's shirt move along the edge of the room with a silver water pitcher, refilling glasses, clearing plates, invisible to every important person there. The only other person in that whole gold room, she thought, who was being looked through the way she was being looked at. She felt, absurdly, a kind of kinship with him. She did not know him. She would have said she had never seen him before in her life. She was wrong about that. But she did not know it yet, and neither did he. Not until the moment, an hour into that long, bright evening, when he came around a pillar with his pitcher and saw a gray-blue dress and a thin, worn gold bangle on a deep brown wrist, and a face he had been seeing in his sleep for 9 months. He stopped. The silver pitcher in his hand went very still. For a moment, the man who could have bought every soul in that ballroom simply stood there in his waiter's shirt and looked at her, and the whole roaring Gala went silent and far away. And inside his chest, 9 months of searching arrived all at once at a single gray-blue point in a sea of jewels. It was her, the kindness in the face. His mother had not exaggerated it. If anything, she had failed to do it justice. Daisy felt someone looking and turned and met the eyes of the quiet waiter, and was confused by what she saw in them. Not the contempt or the pity she had collected all evening, but something else entirely. Something that looked almost like reverence. Like a man looking at the answer to a question he had carried so long he had forgotten it could be answered. And she did not understand it. And she looked away, embarrassed, and missed the moment he set the pitcher down on a side table, very gently, with the air of a man putting down a thing he would not be needing anymore. Because here is what no one in that ballroom knew. Not the Adigwas, not the Baloguns, not Chinyere drunk on her own cruelty, not Mama Nkechi grinning with her cane, not Adeze herself, holding her mother's bangle by a pillar. The man in the waiter's shirt was the host, the benefactor, the man who had bought and saved the hospital and put his name on nothing, the richest man in the land, who had walked his own gala all evening in disguise, pouring water, watching the door. And he had just found, standing humiliated by a pillar in a servant's dress, the one face he had crossed a city and emptied his patience to find. And he was done watching. He turned, and he began to walk across the floor toward her, and one by one, the way a wave turns a row of stones, the people of that ballroom began to turn and look. Because there is a thing that happens in a room when a man who has decided something walks through it, and every important person there felt it before they understood it, and the music itself seemed to falter, and the laughing women near the pillars stopped laughing, and Chinyere, sensing some shift she could not name, turned from her conversation and saw the strange, intent waiter crossing the entire ballroom in a straight, unbroken line through dukes of industry and daughters of old money, none of whom he so much as glanced at, walking directly, unmistakably, toward her cleaning girl. "What is he doing?" Chinyere said. To no one. "What is the waiter doing?" He reached Adaz. He stopped in front of her, this tall, quiet man in his plain charcoal shirt. And the whole room had gone silent enough now that his voice, though he spoke softly, carried to every gold corner of it. "Forgive me," he said. "I have to ask. 9 months ago in the rain, by the old market, did you carry an old woman on your back through the city and refuse to give your name?" Daisy stared at him. The memory came up slow, from very far down, a memory she had filed under nothing. The rain, the gray old woman on the wet ground, the 3 million people walking past, her own voice. "It doesn't matter, Mama, get home safe." Yes, she said. "But how could you?" "Because," the man said, and his voice was not quite steady now. This man whose voice was steady through boardrooms that decided the fates of thousands. "That old woman is my mother, and she has not stopped talking about you for 9 months. And I have looked at every market in this city for a gray-blue dress and a gold bangle, because she told me you wore them, and because she told me there was no one else like you alive. And I did not believe her. And I am standing here telling you that she was right." The silence in the ballroom was total now. You could have heard the bangle slide on Daisy's wrist. And then the man in the waiter's shirt did the thing that ended the Okonkwo family's pride forever. Slowly, deliberately, in front of the Adigwes and the Balogans and 300 of the most important people in the region, he reached up and untied the white serving cloth from his arm, and he dropped it on the marble floor, and he straightened. And somehow, with nothing changed but the set of his shoulders, the waiter was gone, and the man was there. And every person in that room understood in a single cold rush exactly who had been pouring their water all night. And a sound went through the crowd, like wind through dry grass. "My name," he said to Adaze, but to all of them, "is the one none of you have been able to get a photograph of. I bought the hospital. I am the patron of this gala. And I have spent 9 months and a great deal of money looking for the kindest person in this city." He looked now, just once, with a terrible mildness, at Chinyere and Mamankechi, frozen at the edge of the floor. "And it appears some of you have had her on your knees scrubbing your stairs. I want you to imagine it. I want you to stand in that ballroom and feel the temperature of it change. Because this is the moment, this is the exact moment, that the books her mother spoke of came open and were read aloud in front of everyone. The proud, who had carried a humble girl into that room to be laughed at, now stood in a silence that was all about them, in the worst way, while 300 important people slowly turned to understand that the Okonkwos, the loud, rich, titled Okonkwos, had been keeping the woman the richest man in the land had crossed the city to find as their unpaid maid, and had brought her here tonight, in rags, on purpose, to mock her. Chinyere's beautiful face did something complicated and ruinous. The blood went out of it and then rushed back. "There's been a mistake," she said, too loud, stepping forward, her hostess smile snapping into place like a thing on a spring. She's our dear friend, of course. We would never." She reached out to take Adaze's arm, to reclaim her, to fold her back into the lie. "Adaze, darling, come. You're embarrassing our host." The man's voice, when it came, was very quiet, and it stopped Chinyere's hand in the air. "Don't touch her." 3 words. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. In a room that quiet, 3 soft words from a man who owned the building landed like a door closing. Chinyere's hand hung there a moment, then withdrew, and the 3 young women in bright Ankara who had spent the evening pointing and whispering now found themselves the ones being looked at. and they shrank back into the crowd as if they could become wallpaper, and could not. The man turned back to Heiress, and his whole bearing changed. The mildness he had shown the Okonkwo's fell away, and what was left was gentle and almost shy. This enormous man made suddenly careful. "You wrapped your own shawl around my mother," he said, "and you carried her on your back, and you would not even let her thank you. Do you know what that is, in a city like this? Do you know how rare you are?" He paused. "I do not even know your name, after 9 months. Will you tell me now?" And Heiress, who had been looked through her whole life, who had been carried into that room as a joke and stood by a pillar and decided they could have the evening but not her soul. Heiress looked up into the face of the only powerful person who had ever in her life treated her as though she mattered, and she felt her mother near her, closer than the bangle, and she said, in a voice that shook only a little, "Heiress, my name is Heiress." "Heiress," he repeated, as if it were a word worth learning. Then, "Heiress." And here, in front of 300 people, the richest man in the land did the thing that put the final, unanswerable end to every cruelty that house had ever shown her. He held out his hand, palm up, the way you offer a hand to an equal, to a guest, to someone you have been waiting your whole life to meet. "Will you let me get you out of this corner they have put you in? There are people here who would be honored to know you. My mother, chief among them. She is sitting up in the gallery, and she has been watching you all night, and she is weeping because she knew you the moment you walked in." Heiress looked at the offered hand. She looked across the floor and saw, for the first time, an old woman she half recognized leaning over the gold rail of the upper gallery, a gray, thin, richly dressed old woman with both hands pressed to her mouth and tears running freely down a face that was, unmistakably, the face from the rain. And Heiress made a small sound and put her own cracked hand into the hand of the man in the charcoal shirt, and the whole ballroom, 300 important souls, exhaled at once. And he led her, not up the back stairs, not to a corner, but straight across the center of that polished floor, through the parted crowd, to the foot of the grand gold-railed staircase, and he stopped there with her, at the bottom of it, in the clean column of light coming down from the landing. And Heiress stood at the foot of a staircase exactly like the one she had scrubbed at dawn that very morning. Except that this time, no one in the world, no doubt, could tell her she did not belong at the top of it. That should be the end. The proud silenced, the humble lifted, the hand offered and taken. But I want you to stay, because grace, when it truly comes, does not do its work by halves. And there were 3 things still to happen in that ballroom that I do not want you to miss. And the first of them is what the man whispered to Heiress at the foot of those stairs, which changed not just her evening, but the entire shape of her life. He bent his head close to her so that only she could hear, and he said, "There is a room upstairs, and in it there is a gown, red, that my mother chose 9 months ago and has kept ready, because she swore to me that the day we found you, you would not spend 1 more minute dressed as someone's servant. You owe these people nothing. But if you would let me, I would like to take you up these stairs and bring you down them again as the guest of honor this Gala has been missing all night. You decide. Either way, you leave here on my arm, and you never scrub another stair as long as you live." And Heiress, standing at the foot of the staircase from her dreams, looked up its full length to the landing where the light came down. And then she looked at the old woman weeping in the gallery. And then she looked at the man who had crossed a city for her. And she thought of her mother in the one-room flat with the rain coming through, holding her face. God keeps a different set of books. "Yes," she said. "I'll come up." The crowd watched the host of the gala lead the servant girl up the grand staircase. They watched the two of them reach the landing and disappear through a gold door, the old woman from the gallery hurrying to meet them. And for the space of perhaps 10 minutes, the ballroom filled with a roar of talk it could not contain. 300 people all at once understanding what they had witnessed, all at once recalling the cruelty the Okonkwo's had paraded all evening, all at once doing the cold arithmetic of where the most powerful family in the city now stood, which was nowhere. Heiress stood frozen near the pillar, where she had ordered her maid to stand. Mama Nkechi's cane had slid from her knees to the floor, and no one bent to pick it up. The 3 Ankara girls had vanished entirely. And then the music stopped, and a hush ran out across the floor, and every face turned, drawn upward, to the top of the grand staircase. She stood at the landing in the clean column of light, and for a moment nobody recognized her. And then everybody did, and the sound that went through the room was not a laugh. A daisy came down the grand staircase of the Harvest of Hope Gala in a floor-length red sequin gown that caught every chandelier in the room and threw it back. Gold drop earrings at her ears, her cornrows loosened into soft dark coils about her shoulders, her cracked hands now bare and steady on the gold rail. And she was, every person in that ballroom understood in a single struck instant, beautiful. Not in the bought, sharp way of the women who had pointed at her, but in the deep, quiet way of a person whose face has finally been allowed to match her soul. She did not rush. She came down one tread at a time, her chin level the way it had been level on the red carpet when she had nothing. And on the 3rd step from the bottom, the man in the now undisguised black of the gala's host stepped forward and offered his arm. And she took it. And the whole room, old money and new, dukes of industry and daughters of titles, every single one of the proud who had laughed at a gray-blue dress 2 hours before. The whole room began, helplessly, to applaud. And Heiress stood at the foot of the staircase on the arm of the richest man in the land, in a red gown that caught the light. And she did not gloat. That is the part I most want you to keep. She did not look once at Heiress. She did not look once at Mama Nkechi. She had carried her dignity into that room when she had nothing. And now that she had everything, she carried it exactly the same. Because her mother had taught her that the proud need an audience and the secure do not, and the most complete revenge a humble person can take on a cruel one is to rise so high, so gracefully, that the cruelty below simply ceases to be visible. She looked instead up at the old woman in the gallery, the woman from the rain, and the old woman blew her a kiss with both hands and wept. And Heiress pressed her own hand to her heart and bowed her head to her, servant to elder, the way she had been raised. And the ballroom, watching it, fell quietly in love with her. Now, the proud. I told you grace does not work by halves. And here's the second thing. The man did not have the Okonkwo's thrown out. He did not humiliate them with a speech. He did something far worse and far truer to the books her mother kept. As the applause died and the gala slowly, dazedly resumed, an attendant approached Chief Okonkwo, who had arrived late and understood nothing and now understood everything, and informed him, with perfect courtesy, that the host wished the Okonkwo family to know there were no hard feelings, that they were, of course, welcome to enjoy the rest of the evening, and that the Children's Hospital was always grateful for the support of generous families. And then the attendant withdrew. And that was all. No accusation, no expulsion. Just 300 of their peers, all night, glancing at them and away, the cold currency of a city's contempt spending itself in 1,000 small, turned shoulders. The Okonkwo's left to stand in the wreckage of their own joke, in a room that now belonged entirely to the girl they had brought to be laughed at, with nothing to do but feel it. Heiress left before midnight. She walked out of the gala she had entered in triumph, with her jet hair still gleaming, and her gold still at her throat, and her face the color of ash. Past the foot of the staircase where her maid stood radiant on a billionaire's arm. And Heiress, true to herself to the last, did not look at her. But the man did. He watched Heiress go, and he leaned to Heiress, and he said, just loud enough for those nearest to hear, "Some people show their character by what they build. Others show it by who they try to break. We always find out which, in the end." And then he turned back to Heiress and forgot Heiress entirely, which was, of all the things done to the Okonkwo's that night, the one that wounded the deepest. To be, after a lifetime of forcing the world to look, finally and completely not worth looking at. And the third thing, the best thing, the thing this whole long evening had been walking toward. The man drew Heiress a little aside, out of the press of well-wishers, for they came now in a steady stream, the very people who had laughed, suddenly desperate to have known her all along. And she received each of them with the same grave courtesy she gave the kitchen boys, which only made them love her more. And he stood with her at the foot of the staircase, and the old woman, his mother, came and took both of Heiress's hands in her thin, strong ones, the same grip that had caught her wrist in the rain, and could not speak for weeping. And Heiress knelt. She was always kneeling, that girl. But this was the last time the world would ever make her do it from below. She knelt and embraced the old woman she had carried on her back through 3 million indifferent people. And the old woman whispered into her hair, "I told him. I told him you were real. They all said no such person was left in the world. I told him." "Mama," Heiress said, "I didn't do anything. Anyone would have." "No." The old woman pulled back and held Heiress's face in 2 hands, exactly the way another dying woman had once held it in a one-room flat with the rain coming through. And Heiress's breath caught at the echo of it. "No, child. That is the whole point. Anyone would have. And no one did. Only you." She looked up at her son and back at the girl. "Do you know why I sent him looking? Not to thank you. You cannot thank a thing like that. It is too large. I sent him looking because a son of mine had grown up rich among people who only ever wanted, and had started to believe there was no such thing as a person who would carry an old woman through the rain and run away before she could even learn their name. I needed him to meet you. I needed him to see that the world still makes people like you, so that he would not give up on it. So that he would not give up on finding someone to spend his life with who was worth—" She stopped and laughed, wet-eyed. "Well, who was worth what you are worth? Which is more than this whole gaudy room put together." And the man, who had been very quiet through this, looked at Heiress in the red gown at the foot of the staircase, and Heiress looked back at him. And something passed between them that the whole watching ballroom understood was the actual beginning of the actual story, the one that would unfold long after this night in the slow ordinary days that real love is built from. And he said, not as a billionaire to a servant, but simply as a man to a woman, "She's right that I was looking for the kindest person in the city. She doesn't know yet that I think I was also looking for you. I'd like to find out. Slowly, properly, if you'll let me." And Heiress, who had been given orders her whole life and asked for her opinion by no one, found that being asked, gently, as an equal, with the whole world watching and none of it mattering, undid her more thoroughly than any cruelty ever had. And she said yes. She would like that too, slowly, properly. And the old woman clapped her thin hands together and wept all over again. The story did not end at the gala. The good stories never do. The gala was only the door. In the months that followed, Adaeze did not vanish into wealth the way the Okonkwo's would have, did not learn to point and laugh from the top of a staircase. She made the man take her, on her first free week, back out to the Eastern Road, to the children's hospital he had bought and saved and never put his name on. And she walked its wards in a plain dress and held the small, thin hands of the children there the way she had held an old woman's hand in the rain. And the man watched her do it and understood, fully and finely, that his mother had not sent him looking for a wife. His mother had sent him looking for proof that goodness survives, and had handed him the proof and the wife and the whole rest of his life in a single gray-blue dress by a pillar. He courted her the way his mother had raised him to, slowly and properly, the way he had promised. He did not bury her in gold or hurry her toward an altar to settle the matter in front of the cameras the city now pointed at them both. He came to her in the evenings, and they walked. And he learned that she hummed to herself when she thought no one heard, hymns her mother had sung, and that she gave away half of everything he put in her hands before the week was out, to a market woman here, a stranded student there, a boy selling sachets of water in the traffic who reminded her of no one in particular and of everyone. He learned that wealth had not changed her 1 degree, that she still rose before the sun out of a habit her body would not give up, that she could not pass a person on the ground in the rain. Could not. The muscle of it was older than her wealth. And he fell the rest of the way in love with her, not at the gala, where the whole city had watched it begin, but in 1,000 small, unwatched moments after, which is the only place real love is ever actually built. And what of the proud? I promised you grace does not work by halves, but grace is not the same thing as cruelty wearing a kinder coat. And so here is the truth of what became of the house that had kept her on its knees. Chief Okonkwo's businesses, which had floated for years on the goodwill of men who now found his name distasteful, began their long, quiet sink, the way a thing sinks when the hands that were holding it up all let go at once and no one announces it. Mama Nkechi grew old in a house gone silent, in the high-backed chair with the carved cane, and fewer people who would sit and be ruled. And Chinyere, who had paid the price of an extra seat to watch a kind girl be laughed at. Chinyere was not struck down, was not dragged through the streets, got no scene of screaming ruin, because that is not how the books are kept either. She was simply, slowly, comprehensively forgotten by the city whose attention had been the whole oxygen of her life. Left to live a long, ordinary life as exactly what she had always most feared being, which was no one in particular. And once, near the end of it all, a great while later, a thin invitation came to Adaeze, in a hand she half recognized, Chinyere's hand. 3 lines. Stiff and proud, and underneath the pride, something almost like asking, congratulating her on a child, signed with a name and nothing else. And Adaeze, who could have let it sit unanswered the way her own pleas had once sat unanswered in that house, did not. She wrote back. She wrote kindly. She did not pretend the past away, and she did not punish it. She simply, the way she did everything, left the door open, because her mother had taught her that you keep your own books clean no matter how anyone else keeps theirs, and that the only revenge worth taking on a proud heart is to become so free of it that you can afford to wish it well. Whether Chinyere ever truly changed, the story does not say. Some do not. But the door on Adaeze's side was open. It always was. They married the next harvest. She wore coral beads. She kept her mother's thin gold bangle on her wrist beneath all the new gold, and on the morning of the wedding she took it off and held it to her heart and spoke to a woman who had died in a one-room flat with the rain coming through the roof, and said only, "You were right, Mama, about the books. You were right." And she put the bangle back on and went out to be married. And at the reception, when the music was loud and the room was full of every important family in the region, many of them the very ones who had laughed at her in gray-blue 2 seasons before, all of them smiling now, all of them claiming her, Adaize slipped away for a moment to the kitchens and found the servers and the cooks and the cleaning girls working back there in the heat, invisible to the bright room, the way she had been invisible all her life. And she did not summon them out for show. She went into them. She thanked each of them by name. And to the youngest cleaning girl, a thin, frightened thing of maybe 17 with cracked knuckles and a worn dress, Adaize knelt down one last time and by her own choice, and pressed something into the girl's hand and closed the girl's fingers over it. And it was a thin, worn gold bangle, her mother's, the most precious thing she owned. And she said, "Keep this, and listen to me. The world will tell you the kind are foolish. Be foolish. God keeps a different set of books. I am the proof of it, standing here in front of you. Be kind when no one is watching. Someone always is." And she rose, and she went back out into the bright room on her husband's arm. And the gala night staircase, and the red gown, and the whole gleaming reversal of her fortunes were behind her now. But the bangle went on, into another cracked young hand, into another hungry year, carrying the only inheritance that had ever mattered forward into a life Adaize would never see. Because that is the way the books are kept. The proud strut into rooms they cannot leave with their dignity. The kind are carried, in the end, up the very staircases they once scrubbed on their knees. And the small, foolish mercy you show an old woman in the rain, when 3 million people walk past and only you stop, that mercy does not disappear. It waits. It grinds slow and exceedingly fine. And one bright evening it comes back across a crowded ballroom in a plain charcoal shirt, and it offers you its hand, and it leads you home. So tell me. And I do want to know, because the people who watch these stories are the ones who already believe it. If you had been there in the rain that night, in the cold, already late, already certain you would be beaten for it, would you have stopped and carried her the way Adaize did, not knowing it would ever come back to you? Or would you have walked past with the other 3 million, sure that kindness is for fools? Leave it below, and while you are there, tell me where in the world you are watching from tonight, because I would love to know how far this story has traveled, and who is out there keeping the same set of books.